I want to start today with a little mental exercise.
Okay.
It's a bit of a Rorschach test for how you view the economy. If I ask you to picture a dirty job,
Hmm.
and I don't mean, Mike Rowe crawling through a sewer, I mean an industry that is actively harmful to people or the planet, what's the very first image that hits your brain?
Well, for most people, it's the classics. A smokestack, belching gray
A
cloud,
bit smokestack, yeah.
oil rig leaking into the Gulf, maybe a coal miner covered in soot.
Right. We visualize physical dirt, grease, smoke, heavy machinery. We rarely picture a glass-walled skyscraper in Manhattan or a silent server farm in Silicon Valley.
Oh.
But today, we're going to challenge that intuition. We've got a massive piece of research here that suggests our radar for risk might be, well, stuck in the 1970s.
It's definitely time for an update. We're unpacking the OECD's 2025 report titled Environmental and Social Impacts Across Industry Sectors.
And before you glaze over at the acronyms, this isn't just a single survey.
No, it's what's called a meta-review.
Let's pause there. We throw that term around. But for the sake of clarity, what exactly distinguishes a meta-review from just a study?
Think of it as a study of studies. So instead of running one small experiment, the OECD aggregated existing academic literature, massive databases of lawsuits, accident reports,
All the existing data.
all of it. And then they cross-referenced all that hard data with a new survey of 133 experts from NGOs, governments, and the private sector.
So they're looking for patterns across, millions of data points?
Exactly. They are trying to find the signal in the noise.
Okay, so the mission for this deep dive is to look for two specific things in that signal. First, we want the convergence. That's where the experts and the hard data hold hands and agree that an industry is a disaster. But second, and I think more importantly, we're looking for the divergence.
That's the sweet spot. That is where our perception of an industry is completely at odds with the reality of the data.
Let's get the obvious stuff out of the way first. The convergence, the usual suspects. If I say extractive industries, mining, oil and gas, coal, I assume the data confirms exactly what we think.
It confirms it and then some.
Yeah.
There is effectively zero debate here.
Yeah.
In the expert survey, mining was the absolute top pick for almost every negative category you can think of.
Like what? What are we talking?
86% of experts flagged it for human rights impacts, 83% for pollution, 82% for corruption.
It's the trifecta. You're hurting people, you're poisoning the land, and you're bribing officials to let you do it.
Basically.
Yeah.
And the hard data backs the experts up completely.
Yeah.
If you look at the Business and Human Rights Resource Center database, which tracks lawsuits globally,
Okay.
nearly 50% of all human rights lawsuits in their records are filed against companies in mining, oil, gas, or coal.
Hold on. 50%, half of all human rights lawsuits in the corporate world are concentrated in just those few sectors?
Yes, that is a staggering concentration of legal liability. If you were digging resources out of the ground, you are statistically the most likely sector to be in the hot seat.
Okay, so that tracks. Dirty jobs are dirty. But there was another sector in this consensus group that hits a little closer to home. It's not some remote oil rig. It's what's on our breakfast table.
Agriculture.
We need to talk about agriculture.
This is the second major area of consensus. And, we often have this pastoral image of farming rolling fields, a red barn.
Right, a tractor in the sunset.
But in terms of impact, agriculture is incredibly heavy. You have the obvious environmental side land use, water consumption. But the report really highlights the labor issues.
I was looking at the notes on the U.S. Department of Labor. They have this list of goods produced by child labor or forced labor.
That is a very sobering document to scroll through.
And agriculture appears more frequently on that list than any other sector. Why is that? Is it just because it's so widespread?
It's the nature of the work. It's often informal, seasonal, and it happens in rural areas where regulatory oversight is.
Well, it's practically non-existent. You can't put a safety inspector in every single field.
Exactly. That makes it a hotspot for exploitation. And we can't ignore the physical danger either.
Dangerous how? Like machinery accidents.
Everything. Heavy machinery, exposure to chemicals, livestock. Fatal occupational injuries are consistently highest in agriculture, forestry, and fishing.
So it's physically lethal and ethically fraught.
Correct.
Then we have the third pillar of this bad reputation club, manufacturing. But the data here pointed out a nuance about safety that I found interesting. It wasn't about fatalities.
Right. While agriculture has the most deaths, manufacturing has the highest volume of non-fatal injuries.
How high?
The International Labor Organization, the ILO, recorded over 1.4 million non-fatal injuries in the manufacturing sector in a single year. This is back in 2021.
1.4 million. That's like the entire population of San Diego getting injured on the job every single year.
And it also leads in strikes and lockouts.
Oh.
So you have a sector that is physically risky for workers and has a very contentious relationship between labor and management.
Okay, so that's the convergence. The smokestack, the mine, the factory, the farm. That tracks with our intuition. But I want to get to the part where the report really challenged my assumptions.
The divergence.
Let's move to the divergence, the hidden risks.
Yes, these are the sectors where the average person or even the expert might think, oh, that's a safe industry. But the data is just screaming something else.
And the first one on this list really threw me. Construction.
Construction is fascinating because it suffers from a massive perception gap.
How so?
We just see it as building things. It feels productive, necessary. We don't associate it with the same level of scandal as, say, an oil spill.
Right. It's visible, it's local. We see the guys in hard hats and vests, and we just think, jobs.
But the data disagrees aggressively.
Yeah.
When you look at the REAP-Risk data set, which is a tool that's great as news for scandals and reputational risk,
Okay.
construction and materials is the #2 sector for total risk incidents.
Wait, number 2. Ahead of oil and gas.
In terms of the sheer volume of incidents in that specific data set, yes. It has over 30,000 recorded incidents. It actually trails only the food and beverage sector.
That seems incredibly high. What are they getting cited for? Is it just safety violations because, things are falling down?
Safety is part of it, naturally. But the big driver here is employment controversies and corruption. Construction ranks #1 for employment controversies.
Why? What is it about building a skyscraper that leads to so many controversies?
It's the structure of the industry. I mean, think about how a skyscraper gets built. You have a developer, then a main contractor, then subcontractors, and subcontractors.
Ah, so you lose visibility.
Exactly. That complexity is a perfect hiding place for forced labor, wage theft, and exploitation. The main contractor might be clean, but the guy pouring the concrete 3 layers down might not be.
And because it involves huge government contracts and permits.
It's a magnet for bribery.
So the Shiny Glass Tower is basically built on a foundation of labor abuse that's hidden in the paperwork. Speaking of money and bribery, let's talk about the one that I think is the most counterintuitive. The financial sector.
Banks and insurance.
I mean, physically, this is the safest job in the world. The biggest risk is spilling hot coffee on your lap.
Or getting carpal tunnel.
Right.
And if we define risk purely as, will I lose a finger, then yes, banking is safe. And the experts in the survey reflected that they didn't rank banks high for employment or human rights issues.
Because they were thinking about physical safety.
Exactly. But the report argues they're looking at the wrong kind of harm. It forces us to change our definition of violence.
How so?
In that REAP-Risk data, financial services is #1 by a long shot for bribery and corruption incidents. They had 8,910 incidents recorded.
I need to contextualize that number. How does 8,910 compare to a dirty industry?
Well, let's compare it to forestry. We think of forestry as environmentally destructive, cutting down the Amazon, right? Forestry had about 133 incidents in the same period. Finance had nearly 9,000.
Wow. That is a massive discrepancy. 133 versus 9,000?
And it's also #1 for consumer interest issues.
Which is a polite way of saying what?
Fraud.
Yeah.
Deceptive marketing. Predatory lending. The harm here isn't that a beam falls on your head. The harm is that your life savings disappear, or you're sold a product that bankrupts you.
I think that's a crucial insight for the listener. We are conditioned to see risk as physical. If I see a factory worker coughing, I think harm.
You think harm, but if I see a banker in a suit, I think success.
Right. But the OECD report is arguing that financial and ethical harm is a massive category of impact that we often ignore because it doesn't bleed.
Exactly. It's a divergence between what we fear, physical danger, and what is actually occurring frequently, financial malfeasance.
Now, there's another type of invisible harm the report highlights. We've done physical, we've done financial. Now we have to talk about digital.
The new risks. The report focuses on software, media, and telecommunications.
Again, these sectors usually look squeaky clean. No smokestacks, no sweatshops, at least not in the server rooms.
They look clean.
Yeah.
And the experts rated them as low impact for almost everything, traditional environment, safety, etc.
Right.
But they dominate a specific category called STI science, technology, and innovation risks.
STI risks. That sounds medical, but I assume it's not. What falls under that umbrella?
Privacy violations. personal data misuse, intellectual property theft. The survey experts almost universally pointed to software and media for these specific risks.
It's interesting because this is a form of pollution, isn't it? It's not smog, it's data pollution. It's the erosion of privacy.
That's a great way to put it. As our economy shifts from industrial to digital, our definition of impact has to shift too. A data breach affecting 100 million people is a massive impact, even if no trees were cut down.
So we have these different views of impact: physical, financial, digital. This leads to a big question the report tries to tackle. Why do the sources disagree? Why does one study say pharma is safe and another says it's risky?
This brings us to the methodology problem. And if you want to be able to read these kinds of reports critically, you need to understand two concepts: materiality and scope.
Okay, let's break those down. Materiality first. What does it actually mean in plain English?
In simple terms, materiality is just a fancy word for relevance. But there are two ways to look at it. One is financial materiality.
What investors care about.
Exactly. It asks, does this risk cost the company money? If a factory floods, that costs the company money. That's financially material.
So is this bad for the stock price?
That's it. The other is impact materiality. This asks, does this risk hurt people or the planet, even if it doesn't cost the company a dime?
And the report found that these don't always overlap.
Sometimes they do. For the worst sectors like coal and mining, they overlap almost perfectly. If you hurt the planet in mining, it usually comes back to bite your bottom line through fines or lawsuits.
So everyone agrees mining is risky.
But for a bank, not so much. Sometimes deceptive marketing makes a company more money in the short term. So it might have high impact materiality on the consumer, you lost your money, but low financial materiality risk for the bank.
At least until they get caught.
Right.
That explains the disconnect. If you're reading a report for investors, banking looks great. If you're reading a report for consumer advocates, banking looks terrible.
Exactly. You have to know who the report was written for.
Now, let's talk about scope. You mentioned the pharmaceutical industry earlier. This part of the report really blew my mind. This is about supply chains, right?
Yes, this is the supply chain issue. There was a specific study cited that looked at the tiers of a supply chain.
Let's define the tiers so we're all on the same page.
Tier 1 is the company you buy from. Tier 2 is who they buy from, and so on. Now, if you look at a pharma company's direct operations, their labs, their offices, they are very safe.
So if you stop looking at Tier 1, they get a gold star.
For their own house, yes. But the study showed that the risk profile changes drastically the deeper you go. They traced the supply chains for chemicals, raw materials.
How bad does it get?
The study showed that if you go down to Tier 4, so 4 steps removed from the final company, almost every sector hits nearly 100% risk for links to child or forced labor.
I want to make sure I heard that correctly. Nearly 100%. For every sector, not just fashion or electronics.
Yes. Whether you are making cars, computers, or pills, once you get deep enough into the global supply chain, you hit the raw commodities, the minerals, the agriculture, the basic chemical extraction, and that is where the labor abuses are rampant.
That is a heavy realization. It implies that clean sectors are really just sectors that are better at buffering themselves from the dirty work.
They've just outsourced the impact to Tier 4.
That's the critical takeaway.
There is no such thing as a cleanly isolated industry in a globalized economy. There are only industries that stand further away from the extraction point.
So when a tech company says, we have zero forced labor in our operations, they aren't technically lying.
No, but they are omitting the reality of their Tier 4 suppliers.
Yeah.
They're speaking about Scope 1, their direct operations, but the world runs on Scope 3, the supply chain.
And that is where the bodies are buried, metaphorically and sometimes literally.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any good news here? Are there any sectors that actually consistently scored low on impact?
Laughing slightly. There are a few bright spots. The report identifies a bottom of the list. These are sectors that consistently scored low across almost all metrics: education, real estate, and nonprofits.
Education and nonprofits make sense. But real estate, given what we just said about construction.
It's a technical distinction. Construction is the act of building high-risk, high-injury. Real estate is the management and selling of property.
Which the experts perceive as a low risk.
And the data mostly agrees.
Although, I have to push back on that. Real estate is notorious for money laundering. We hear about oligarchs buying penthouses to hide cash.
You're absolutely right, and the report does note that. Real estate shows up in corruption and bribery data. It's not spotless. But compared to coal mining, its aggregate impact score is relatively benign.
It's all relative. It's the least worst option.
Correct.
So let's wrap this up. What does this all mean for our listener? If you're reading the news or maybe looking for a job, what should you do with this info?
I think the main takeaway is to update your mental model of harm. We have a 20th century view focused on industrial accidents and pollution. We look for the smokestack.
Right.
But in the 21st century, the biggest risks are often invisible or buried deep in a supply chain.
So when we assess a company, we shouldn't just look at the surface.
No. Ask yourself, are we talking about physical harm or are we talking about digital and financial harm?
Yeah.
If you're looking at a bank, don't worry about their carbon footprint as much as their lending practices. That's where their real impact is.
And remember that Tier 4 statistic.
Absolutely. Transparency usually stops at Tier 1 or 2. Knowing that the risk hits 100% at Tier 4 should make us all a little more skeptical of any clean claims.
It essentially shatters the illusion of the clean job. It seems like every industry has a shadow. It just falls in a different direction.
That's a poetic way to put it. And it highlights why data is so important. Perception is construction is just building. Data is construction is a hotbed of forced labor. We need the meta reviews to see the whole picture.
It leaves me with a final, somewhat provocative thought. If we could see Tier 4 clearly, if we had a perfect transparency, would we be able to buy anything with a clear conscience? Or does the modern economy rely on us not looking that far down?
That is the multi-million-dollar question. The data suggests that right now the global economy is so interconnected that purity is almost impossible. The goal has to be knowing where the risks are so we can manage them, rather than just pretending they don't exist because they're 4 steps removed.
A heavy thought to leave us with, but better to know the reality than to rely on a comforting myth. That's all for this deep dive into the OECD's report. We'll be back next time with another stack of sources to unravel. Thanks for listening.